Hello everybody, good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Live at the Waterhole, where first up we're in the wonderful Madikwe Game Reserve at Tau Lodge in the northwest province of South Africa. My name is Ralph Kirsten, and what does the bush hold in store for us today? Well, you'll have to sit back, relax and watch as the animals come down to quench their thirsts and cool off. And as per usual, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience, so we'd love for you to board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the Wild Earth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter, using the hashtag WildEarth. What is it that you'd like to see? What would you like to chat about? Whatever it is, wildlife related, send it on through. And currently, we see a nice big bull elephant just sauntering through there in the background. A couple of waterfowl in the waterhole itself as well. Black-winged stilts just doing their thing. That lovely big boy over there. Nice, just nice and slowly. I wonder if he's had a drink already and he's making his way out. Looks as such. Lots of birds calling just near to the camera as well. Normally the little blue wax bills. And it sounds like there might be a little apellis, yellow-breasted apellis, together with maybe a green-backed Cameroptera. All the thickets right very close to the camera itself, so we can hear them chattering away, while off in the distance we can watch the zebra and the elephants doing their thing. I think we've seen this guy before. He's got no hair on the end of his tail, unless there's a few of them around. Might be the same one. The grey go-away bird is calling as well, otherwise known as the kwe-fuil, and that's exactly what he was doing. Kwe. Does seem to be quite warm. You can see the sort of heat waves rising up from this white, almost calcrete soil. And it seems like quite a hot day, even though we're heading into winter. Always good to have a check around and see if there's any crocodiles about. No sign for now. There's your black-winged stilts, joined by I think a common moorhen. So they've got nice long bills and they can probe into the mud, all the little grubs and invertebrates that are living there. Always good to scan about here in this lovely greenery that the elephants like to come and feed in. Some of the waterbuck as well. Alright, so it seems like the camera got a little bit stuck there in one spot. So we've changed of place and we've gone to the Greater Kruger Park and into the Sabi Sands in Djuma. The waterhole there looks like a water thickney just next to the waterhole. Normally a nocturnal bird, so they have very little activity during the day, but as soon as the crepuscular period comes along, aka the sort of dusk period, that's when they start calling, a very high pitch whistle that they have, and then they're active during the night more so. So this water thickney also used to be known as the water dikkop, which is an Afrikaans word, dikkop, meaning fat head, and now they've changed it to thickney. A little bit of a difference there. But it's a species of bird in the thickney family, which is Burhinidae. And they're found right across sub-Saharan Africa, and normally close to water, as we're seeing here. They've got a very widespread distribution, so at a lot of the waterholes you may find them, and right across from Angola, Botswana, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Republic of Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, Eswatini, the old Swaziland, Ivory Coast, and all the way through down to South Africa. So a very wide distribution. As we see there, there's some elephants about as well. And some of you may have seen me out on Amakhala Game Reserve over the weekend. And if you haven't seen me on the drives before, the sunrise and sunset safaris, starting with Safari Live from the Masai Mara into the Juma periods as well, Kariga Game Reserve, as well as Amakhala. Well, if you've only heard my voice on Live at the Waterhole, well, at least now you can put a face to the voice. So Dark Main Lover, first up with the first comment, saying, good afternoon, Ralph. Happy that you're hosting this fantastic Live at the Waterhole show. Well, lovely to have you on board as well, Dark Main Lover. Always lovely. You can just see how much the bush color is changing here in these parts. Only summer rainfall and being in the savanna biome, as well as mostly deciduous plants. We have a very change of season, a very big change of seasons, and change of coloring with the grasses turning brown and the trees losing their leaves. Very different to the likes of Amakhala, where they have all year rainfall, the thicket biome, and mostly evergreen plants. So I think this individual is part of a bigger herd. There were quite a few elephants around earlier, so I think just one of the stragglers. It's generally the bulls, the younger bulls, that are still part of the breeding herds that are the stragglers. and they slowly but surely start spending less and less time with the herd itself. But they can follow on for a few years, but they're sort of on the outskirts and linger longer than the breeding herds, especially at waterholes. Right, so nice little stop in here with this elephant at Juma, but I think let's change of place. Let's head to Zimbabwe, one of the 7 wonders of the world at Vic Falls. And here, of course, well, it seemed like there was a little bit of an issue there with that camera. So we've bounced on back to Juma. The marabou storks were out. I think they're waiting for their lunchtime snack at the Vulture restaurant next to the Victoria Falls Safari Lodge. So maybe we'll check in a little bit later there if the cameras play along, and we'll maybe see as the vultures and the marabou storks get fed. It seems he's feeding on through some silver cluster leaf there. You can see that silvery tinge to the leaves in this plant in the foreground. The one in the background looks like a red bush willow. So that's Combretum apiculatum. Very hard wood. But I think when they're smaller, they might be easier to chew. I wouldn't imagine an elephant feeding on the thicker bark of the red bush willow. Extremely hard wood, second only to the leadwood. I must say the red bush willow, probably my favorite all-time firewood. You only need a few pieces and they can last all night, and you'll still be able to boil your kettle on it in the morning. So just for the amount of wood used, I would say it's the most economical of all the woods out there. Mopani, also very good. Leadwood as well, but that's a protected tree. The red bush willow is actually a bush encroach, so it's not a problem to use quite a lot of that, but you don't need to because of the density of the wood. It lasts forever. And of course, the leadwood being more dense, so dense that it sinks when you throw it in the water. That's why it's called a leadwood, because of how heavy it is and that it doesn't float. So Lenny asking, what is the largest amount of elephants you have seen together in one place? Lenny, I would have to say in the Chobe National Park in Botswana. I was very lucky that some friends of ours, they were the owners of a houseboat safari company. So we went with a bunch of friends when they had some downtime. We took 2 boats and we went down into the Chobe National Park from the Namibian side, so we didn't enter into Botswana. But we camped on an island just on the opposite bank of the Chobe National Park. And one evening we sat and watched. It must have been thousands of elephants. Just there was like a mud hole in the Chobe River, which is sort of a backwater of the Zambezi. And they just kept coming past. It must have been for about 4 hours non-stop. These elephants just came to this mud hole. And they all enjoyed wallowing around in the mud, but there was a real procession of them. And none of them really stuck for more than 5 or 10 minutes because there was a whole line of them coming along and almost queuing up for this obviously favored spot of theirs. And that's probably the most I've seen in one spot within a certain time frame. But I've also seen pretty much all of the desert elephants congregating in Namibia, in Damaraland, which for me was an absolute spectacle. It seemed like there were hundreds of them, but I think there was probably less than 100. There's not that many desert elephants, so it was just about the entire population all congregated together, which was an absolute spectacle for me. I've never seen anything like it. And that was around 2017 where I saw it in the Huab River, which is near to Tweefelfontein in Damaraland. But in the Kruger Park as well, northern Pafuri or the Makuleki concession as well, I've seen huge herds of elephants there. But I must say, nothing can compare to the numbers that I saw in the Chobe National Park. When we speak of on live at the Waterhole, in Madikwe Game Reserve, but that was at the Jamala Waterhole a few months ago in the heat of summer. We also had literally hundreds of elephants coming through at the Jamala. There was one stinking hot day where there was over 100 elephants at the Waterhole at the same time, but they also kept coming as the other ones left, and so I'm pretty sure that it exceeded 150 elephants as we were watching. It was just absolutely spectacular as well. Now, I wonder if this is Dewey, our resident hippo here at the Djuma Waterhole. Looks a little bit sleepy. He's probably been out overgrazing. Now he's catching up on some sleep. Now, just spoken about Jamala and the elephants there, and with Dewey here, who I think this hippo, sleeping, not going to be too active, I don't think, in the next little while. So I think let's change of place and let's head to Jamala. Where we don't have the numbers that I spoke of. I think a little bit down to the season and that it's cooling off quite substantially. So not so hot as it was in the heat of summer, definitely. In winter, it still can get into the upper 20s, sometimes even lower 30s in these parts, but it doesn't last very long. And the nights can actually go below freezing. So the elephants aren't so hot and they don't spend as much time at the water in the winter months. And that's exactly why we're not seeing so many more. But at least we've got one come through for a drink. Also seems like a young bull. Maybe he's a straggler too. Or he could have already gone independent and moving around on his own. So African Sunset was saying, hi Ralph, lovely to see you on the live this weekend. How much of a problem is the herpes virus to South Africa's elephants? Prevalent, African Sunset, but it all depends on their, immunity at the time. When they, it definitely rears its head in times like winter when the resources are low. And then you start to see it raising up, especially on their trunks where you see growths or bulges coming through. And it can affect them then as their condition worsens, so does the herpes attack. So, it can always be prevalent, but necessarily showing symptoms. It's when their immunity drops that then it will start to rear itself. So it can be fatal, but it all depends on, it's obviously like a controlling factor. It's similar to the parasites. They'll obviously always be prevalent and present within a lot of the animals, but it's only when the resources are low, their condition drops, then the immunity drops with it, and then it starts to rear its head. And if they don't gain in strength, it obviously can be fatal. So, and we do see those fatalities coming through when we have droughts, for instance, or major fires, that sort of decimate areas, and the elephants aren't able to feed enough, or there's not enough water, whatever it is, that's prolonged, then you start to see fatalities coming through, and a bit of a controlling factor that we have in the bush. And it's quite important. You would say that as humans, we would want to eradicate the disease, we would want to eradicate the parasites. But this is all sort of survival of the fittest, natural selection, and only this genetics will go through when those times are tough. So I think it's a really important natural controller with the weaker genetics. So it's not always a bad thing, even though we see it as such. I think that's just nature doing its thing. And Catherine was asking, what's your favorite place to go on safari and what's your dream destination? Catherine, I have to say that I've got favorite safari destinations for particular reasons. So, and I'll explain why I say this. So I couldn't, it would be difficult for me to choose one place. The Sabi Sands, if you want to see leopards, it's just absolutely insane. You shake a tree in the Sabi Sands and a leopard falls out. So, with that in mind, for big predators, such as leopard, lion, spotted hyena, and the interactions between them, as well as wild dogs, I would have to say the Sabi Sands and the greater Kruger at large. But having been to the Masai Mara as well, with the cheetah and the lion populations there, which is massive, this is another spot that I think is amazing for that. Not so many leopards, although I've seen the largest leopard that I've ever seen in the Masai Mara. It actually had a baby giraffe up a tree. So for lions and sheer density of them, especially during the migration, I would have to say then the Masai Mara. For the landscape and the largest elephants in the world, I would have to say Etosha National Park. It's just the place is just stunning, and for photography, it's absolutely amazing. The colors that you get there. So, and the reasoning that I say that, in the Kruger, as well as the sort of KwaZulu-Natal down into the Eastern Cape, it can be a little bit bland sometimes because you've either got brown color or green, and really have as many contrasts. Where I find in the desert, there's just so much color. You would think that that wouldn't be the case because it's the desert, but early mornings and late afternoons in Etosha National Park is insane with the colors because you've got the white calcrete soils, and then you've got the blue sky, and often you have black rocks if there's any sort of rocky outcrops, and the animals then contrast with this. It's just the photography there that I've seen in comparison with wildlife photography in the Kruger and in the Masai Mara. Contrasts are just nowhere near what you get in Etosha National Park. It's something else. Then going down into Damaraland for the desert elephants. So that's why I say each place has its specific reasoning for that. Madikwe, I would also have to say, for wild dogs in particular. Right, so a lovely stop in here at Chamala just to catch up with this elephant and this small little herd of zebra. But it seems like it's not the only place where elephants are pulling in, and one of my favorite places. Let's head on over to the Etosha National Park and Okukuyu. Where they have returned to the western side of the park. So what happens with the elephant populations, with me having gone to Etosha for over 20 years running, and at one stage I pretty much called it my home because I was spending about 10 days a month in Etosha on my circuits overlanding. So I got to know the park really well. And what happens is normally around December time is when the big rains start falling, but they start and the rain comes from the east. So it normally lands in the Namutoni areas first, and the elephants smell the rain, and it's very dry at that time, so they all start heading over there because as the rain starts falling, the vegetation just explodes. The Bushman grass starts coming out of the ground, almost from nothing, but those seeds can stay dormant for up to 10 years. But as soon as it rains, literally 2 days after the rain has fallen, it's almost immediately green. The plants are just going ballistic. The elephants are obviously feeding on that, move over there, and with the fresh water that's fallen as well. And they spend quite a few months there. And now when it starts to dry up again around this period of May, they all start to move back into this area. So it's been quite a long time since we've seen big elephant herds at the Okukuyu waterhole. But now, for the next few months, we can have this on a daily basis and sometimes on an hourly basis. As you see, a tiny little baby there having a real proper swim in the morning in the water with its mum. So, and Marula Shortcake was asking around herpes that we mentioned earlier, and does it present the same way that human herpes does? It is similar, Marula Shortcake, because in African elephants, related forms of these herpes viruses, which have been identified in wild populations, they're generally benign, but they will, sometimes surface to cause small growths or lesions, and they look like lumps on their trunks in general. You'll see it on their trunks. It almost looks like they've had a wound, and then it's a bit of scar tissue that's moved over it. But much like humans, where it presents itself on the lips, sometimes you get these lumpy, almost outgrowths on your lips, and it's also generally when your immunity is down, particularly sometimes when you get sunburnt, for instance, and this can show up with that herpes. But it's generally, as I say, benign, especially in African elephants. But when the immunity is down, it can be fatal. But sometimes of the herpes virus that the Asian elephants get, there's a highly fatal strain of it, which kills up to 80% of severely affected individuals in the Asian elephants. But with the African elephants, it's generally, as I say, when you have drought periods or real extreme circumstances that will have fatalities. Otherwise, it's a little bit like us humans. It sort of rears itself and it goes away, and sometimes, but mainly when your immunity's down. And Dark Mane Lover saying, I love elephants. They're very intelligent animals, and I think they're more intelligent than man to a certain extent. I think on a mass extent, Dark Mane Lover, particularly with reading body language and just being in with their environment. I think us as humans, we've sort of almost taken the natural side of our existence away in many ways in the concrete jungles and the official environment that we have placed ourselves in. We're no longer really part of nature. We sort of visit it and then go back to our artificial environment once more. So the elephants living in it all the time, so in tune with the weather, with the environment, with the creatures that inhabit it, with them, and with each other. And I think we could learn a lot from them, indeed. See that tiny little baby there just grabbing onto the tail. Mommy's pulling it back. I think it's mommy. Maybe it's not. Looks like it wanted to follow one of those elephants there and it's just pulled back. Having an absolute ball. Now, this is one of the most visited waterholes in Etosha, the most famous waterhole of all, and it's also their administrative capital, National Park. You'll see now, it looks like the signal has been given, a big part of this herd, and I think are going to start to leave now. And they walk off on a particular route, which I like to call the Yellow Brick Road. It's a pathway that they have pretty much made themselves, I think. It's the elephant path, and a lot of the other animals use it too, and so much so that they've dropped so much dung on it that it's got a yellow look to it as well. And it's important because walking through this calcrete rocks, a lot of that is quite sharp. So it not only helps the elephants walk through unhindered, it also helps all the rest of the animals have a nice clear pathway to the wall as well. You'll see them all head into a line now eventually, and then they'll head off in the direction of what is called Sprootjieswoud, or the fairy, or I think it's the fairy forest, which is made up of the moringa trees. There's a forest of moringa trees, which are also called the upside down trees. They're quite similar to the baobab, where it looks like roots are, up in the sky, and they're upside down. And they're heading in that direction. It's a lovely stop to go and visit if you ever do get to Etosha National Park, and that's the direction that those elephants are walking in now. So even now, in the middle of the day, which is the most bland period, anywhere in Namibia, in the desert, because the sun's directly above you and things start, there's no real contrasts, especially with the shadows. Even now, look at the blue color of the sky. You've got the white of the calcrete rocks and soil, and then you've got the gray colors of the elephant, etc. The photography that comes from this particular waterhole is absolutely amazing, particularly around sunrise and sunset when the contrasts are just, off the charts. All right, so while the elephants move off on the elephant highway, all in a line, I think we'll do the same, and let's head on back to Victoria Falls. We don't see the marabou storks anymore. I think they've all headed on over for their snack at the safari lodge. They'll return soon once the few pieces of meat are totally finished. And there we can see a crocodile in the water. It's not the first time we've seen it, if it's the same one. I'm pretty sure it is. It's quite a big one as well. Now, there was a question from Lenny saying, do male hippos understand or think if male offspring are their own and will not kill them, like male lions or leopards? So, Lenny, yeah, they will tolerate them up until a point. So, within their harem and their territory, they'll have a number of females. Obviously, they'll have a number of offspring. And the males will be tolerated until they start becoming sexually mature. Then the males will start to be smelling their testosterone, starting to fight with them because of their size. And those youngsters will start becoming boisterous, especially around the females. And that's when they get chased by the big bulls and will have to go and establish their own territories. Lions are very similar in that they'll tolerate their own offspring, males. The females will stay within the same pride, and the same with the hippos. The females could stay within that same harem, unless the male is driven off by another male, for instance. But with the lions, it remains the same until that male lion becomes borderline sexually mature. Then he'll be chased out of the pride, or he'll be killed, and that's when they become nomadic, very often joining up with each other and forming a coalition if there's similar aged males that move out at the same time. Otherwise, they will be killed if they can't get enough food for themselves, because remember, before that, the pride would have been hunting for them as well. They would have been part of the team, and then they'll be on their own, and they've got a real baptism of fire during that period. They survive or die. And we've seen a lot, even in the Sabi Sands, these bedraggled young males that come through. They're obviously on the run and very often get, because they're not able to get enough food. They're always on the run, and eventually they lose condition to the point that they can't even hunt properly, and then it's a downward spiral. With leopards, a bit different, I would say, to the previous two species of hippos and lions. The males will tolerate them, but it will also come to a point where if there is a female that's an estrus and the dominant male or the father comes into that area to mate with the female, if his son does the same, the father would and could kill him, and he'd have to really vacate the area. So there's certain times when they won't tolerate their sons. Otherwise, if there's not that scenario, there can be, and we've noticed that with different leopards, the sons of dominant leopards in a particular area, they will be tolerated and sometimes even meals shared. But when it comes down to mating rights, that's when it's almost where the line is drawn. There was a yellow-billed stork there, and you can see lots of shadows of the birds flying. I think they're all still trying to, or have already finished their meal at the safari lodge. Here comes a marabou stork, probably to wash down his little snack, and lots of them moving out already. So I think the snack is done. So mostly white-backed vultures and hooded vultures that we're seeing there. The white-backed vultures are pretty much in the majority, I would say, and then obviously the marabou storks as well. The odd lappet-faced will be amongst them too, but look at that, lots and lots of them, all trying to catch the therm as they rise. The ultimate paragliders. Remember that they've got those bare patches of skin on their chests, so they can actually feel where the thermals are, and so remain in them and get the ultimate lift. They are the experts of thermals. I've seen similar pictures to this, not on a wildlife front. Alps, when it's sort of heading into summer, you see the paragliders all near to the mountain edges, where the thermals are, looking exactly like this from a distance. But obviously their colorings aren't black. There's lots of different color wings, as we call it, with paragliding. And you've got the blues and reds and yellows, obviously a bit bigger than these guys as well, but never anything close to as good as these guys in catching those thermals. Just look at them as they go up. You can actually see how they're circling. They are literally in those upward whirlwind currents of the thermals. As the heat is rising, they're remaining perfectly in them, and that's why they gain so much height over such a short space of time. It seems like the vultures have their snack and off they go into the thermals, gain height, maybe look for any other carcasses that may be around from a very big height advantage. But most of the marabou storks, not quite as good thermalers as the vultures are, and they seem to prefer coming in for a drink immediately after their snack and hanging about here, more so than going off and flying around. The yellow-billed stork there is starting to a little bit. They hunt with their bills open and then move from side to side, and anything that they touch, they'll just shut the bill closed on the prey. You see the crocodile now slithering off in the water. You almost need some jaw music as he's doing such. There comes the old stork in his typical hunting pose, bill open. Oh, maybe got something there. And you'll see they also kick the mud up with their feet. And then as whatever it is in the mud is trying to get away from the feet, running straight into the bill. So out of pan and into the fire. So Jesse was asking, do crocodiles have a symbiotic with any animal? That's a lovely question, Jesse, because yes, in fact they do. I think there's only one, but crocodiles have a mutualistic relationship with plovers and lapwings as well. But it's mainly the little plovers, so like a three-banded plover, and I've seen it actually with some of the lapwings too, where they will eat leftover food from between the crocodile's teeth when they sit sunning themselves on the banks of waterholes or rivers. And so it gives the bird a free meal, and the crocodile has a free trip to the dentist. So yes, in fact, there is that mutualistic relationship. I'm not sure if sometimes the crocodile may actually shut its mouth while the plover is busy. But generally, I've never seen one get killed, but I've seen the plovers busy feeding on those leftover pieces of meat between the crocodile's teeth while they're sunning themselves. So that's quite an interesting one. There's a great egret on the opposite bank, a big white bird. Looks like the marabou storks are also disappearing now. They've had enough. I'm going to go catch up with the vultures. So this one on the right here will be the saddle-billed stork. So we see lots of different kinds of storks here. The marabou stork, the yellow-billed stork, and saddle-billed. Slightly bigger than the yellow-billed, slightly smaller than the marabou. looking chap though. Carl was asking, are there ever instances with long beaks actually break them? It does happen, Alex. It's in unusual circumstances. Sometimes when they fight with each other. I've also seen birds, like hornbills, who also have relatively long bills, fighting with themselves in reflections, whether it be in the windows or on mirrors or whatever it might be. They actually fight so much that they buckle and break their own beaks. And I've seen once or twice where this also happened, but I think it's mainly between when they're fighting over food source. That's when it generally occurs. Not a regular occurrence, but it does happen. Sounds like there's quite a lot of Maxwells here as well. And shouldn't spot Battis. And a few of these driving. shame. It seems like it looks like a young stork. It's got a bit of a limp. Some impala around as well. And I've noticed that seeing a little bit of the beginnings of the rutting season, the males are getting a little bit more towards each other, and we're hearing a little bit more of the noises that they're beginning. They're sort of along, and their snorts and grunts. So we might start seeing more of that as the day progresses. And as the days get shorter, heading into winter. That seems to be the trigger for the increase in testosterone in the males, and then that's when they start to fight for mating rights with the females. Right, so nice little bit of birding here at Victoria Falls, particularly the storks. But I think let's continue in that vein. However, let's change of place completely. Let's head back to Africa, near to Kimberley and Kamfersdam. Where we've got a lovely view of our beautifully pink flamingos. What a sight that is. Both lesser and flamingos mixed in here. The lesser is slightly more pink and smaller, as the name suggests. The greater flamingo, a little bit more white on their backs and more pink under the wings. They don't get that real pinkish tinge as much as the lesser flamingos. So you'll see lots of them standing on one leg. We've chatted about this ad nauseum. And it's all to do with energy efficiency. Standing on one leg, they actually say, the scientists have proven that it takes less energy for the flamingos to stand on one leg than it is to stand on two. You wouldn't think so, but it's just to do with the way that they shift their weight onto that one leg. And then they also get their one leg out of the water. And in terms of thermoregulating themselves and keeping warm or cool or whatever it might be, having only one leg in the water helps for that as well. So there's a little bit more reason to the madness than just feeling like standing on one leg. There's a couple of reasons behind it. So Sasha asked a very good question. Are flamingos in the stork family? You would think so, wouldn't you? Just because of their long legs, long neck. They don't have those very straight bills, though. But in fact, flamingos are the only members of the family Phenocopteridae. Phenocopteridae. And the distinguishing characteristics include the long legs, a long curved neck, as well as a goose-like voice. But wait for it, the really interesting part, what animal is related to a flamingo? And it is in fact a grebe, because a study of their DNA delivered a stunning surprise. Flamingos' closest living relatives appear to be the smallish waterbirds known as grebes. And an even bigger surprise, DNA indicates that flamingos and grebes share an ancestry not with other waterbirds, but with very different looking land birds, like doves. So they are very much unique and a very surprising ancestry and DNA as well. Lovely question, Sasha. Thank you. That in the background sounds like African fish eagles, which is lovely. Might not be all of their call, but that is a bit of it. Now, there's a lovely question coming in from Russell asking, when people get bird feathers for things such as pillows and other goods, are they doing this illegally? I'm not sure on the legality of it, but I think this is a lovely topic, Russell, because I think it's important for anybody that utilizes any kind of animal product to understand exactly where it comes from so that you can make an informed decision, either yay or nay, and if you're comfortable with that, with all the information. So I found a lovely article from gentleworld.org, and they speak of the birds of the down industry, and saying that down and feathers are technically byproducts of the meat and egg industry, and the story of their production is just as disturbing as that of any other animal-sourced product. Depends the way you look at it. An opinion on this. So I'm just, on my opinion, I will at the end, but I'm just going to read the article before you can make up your own, and I'll obviously give mine. If you're considering buying a stuffed with down or body feathers, the first thought on your mind probably isn't where or whom did these feathers come from, and do I want to be supporting the industry that harvested them? After learning about the animals involved in the down and feather industry, you'll hopefully be determined to make your household and clothing feather-free, depending on who you are. Down. So down is the undercoating of waterfowl, which is normally goose, duck, swans, and consists of light filaments growing from a central point, thereby creating a three-dimensional structure which traps air and down insulating ability. So it's designed to keep water warm, but it's now commonly used and promoted as a natural stuffing for warm clothing and bedding for humans instead. But body feathers from ducks, geese, and other birds, meat or eggs, are also stuffed pillows, cushions, bedding, clothing, and other such items. It takes the down from approximately 75 plus birds to make a comforter. And as ducks and geese are the primary animals used for the production of down, this piece will predominantly focus on how the down and feather industries affect these particular birds. So where are the down and feathers used in clothing sourced from? 50% of the down and feathers used globally are produced in China. The majority, 90%, come from ducks. So ducks and geese are not raised solely for their down, though, as we know. They're used instead for eggs, meat, or foie gras, for me, which is a terrible practice. So anyway, French might say no, and I think around the world we have different crazy practices that we do with animals. So we can't always point a finger when we need to look inwards first. So purchasing down products directly supports these industries. So that much like the link between veal, and this is important for a lot of people to understand, because a lot of people don't understand how milk is gotten from the dairy industry. So much like the link between veal or the juvenile calves and the dairy industry, the male, we call them tollies in South Africa, the male youngsters are slaughtered so that the females remain pregnant, so they always have milk and they continue milking the cows. There's a strong link between foie or the fatty liver from force-fed ducks and geese and the down and body feathers used in household items. So although the majority of feathers come from China, they're also produced in Hungary, Poland, Turkey, the European Union, and the US, and I'm pretty sure in South Africa as well. So how are the body feathers removed from the birds? There are technically three methods used to remove them: post-mortem, gathering, and live plucking. So post-mortem, after slaughter. For this method, the feathers are removed from the bodies after they are killed for their flesh and their internal organs like foie gras. And the process usually involves scalding the birds' bodies in hot water for 1 to 3 minutes, so the feathers are easier to pull out. Feathers can then be plucked, often by hand, after which the down is removed by hand or machine. I think this is probably the best method of the lot. Plucking. This is exactly sounds like. A goose or duck is held down by their neck or wings as the targeted feathers are torn from their skin. When this process, it's sewn up with a straight needle, no analgesic or sterilization used, and the bird is left to recover before the next harvest of feathers. So this process is every 6 to 7 weeks before the bird's eventual slaughter or death from the trauma of the plucking process itself. Then there's gathering, and this is on live birds as well, but a little better. The live geese, and it's defined as removing feathers that are ripe due to the phenomenon of molting, and would refer to using a brushing or combing action to remove feathers or down. So while the term gathering sounds nicer, in most operations, hundreds of birds have their feathers collected at one time. Even if all of the birds are the same stage of molting, which is unlikely, feathers mature at different times on different parts of the body. So some feathers are likely to be plucked by accident during this process as well. The method of catching, carrying, and restraining birds is also the same, no matter whether the feathers are live plucked. The down and feather industry representatives claim that the majority of down and other feathers on the market are removed from the birds after they are killed for their flesh or organs, and thus the feathers are an inevitable byproduct of the meat industry. Now, I'm really behind, if you are going to kill and use everything that you can, because then then for me it makes sense. There's no waste, and at least the animal didn't die for nothing. While the meat and geese industry and the down industry are intrinsically connected, in February 2000, a Swedish TV documentary called into question claims about the rare live plucking. And that documentary supposedly discovered that in reality, to 80% of the down on the market was coming from live birds. This was denied by the China Feather and Down Industry Industrial Association, but IKEA, which is a Swedish furniture company, independently verified this fact and promptly cancelled orders from China at the time. Now, what does this tell us? It suggests that instead of some birds being live plucked and then killed, and others having their feathers after they have been killed, as if that would make it any. Most birds are probably live plucked many times before they are killed for their flesh and organs, and then their down feathers are taken from them again and for the final time after death. So, yes, down and feathers are technically byproducts of the meat and egg industry and thus legal. And the story of their production is just as disturbing as that of any other animal-sourced product. So, as we know from the story of leather and other products like rennet, casein, blood meal, and manure, these byproducts are very profitable. And whenever something is profitable, you can always think that there's various outcomes. Purchasing them does perpetuate the cycle of animal abuse and use that from. So however you weigh all those three methods of down harvesting, any purchase of down or feathers funds the animal exploitation industries that they are part of and requires the enslavement and eventual deaths of the involved. So it is essential to human life, and we thrive in warm climates and moderate our clothing in cold climates to insulate and protect us from the elements. While some people may think that using our fellow animals' evolutionary adaptations, like tough skin, warm feathers, and fur, for our own benefit is the price of our nomadic wanderings, I think it's something ethically that everybody does themselves. I'm not saying one thing or the other. I just prefer that if animals are going to be used, that it should be done ethically. But it's always difficult when there's profits involved in a capitalist world. So it's a tough one. I think there just needs to be regulations. And if they can do it while they're molting, then fine. And once they are dead, then fine. But live plucking, I think, for me, is not cool. And I wouldn't want to. But it's a difficult one, though. Sometimes difficult to know exactly the products that you buy have come from and what the animals suffered as a result. Anyway, that's one article. It's not to say the other side of the argument. So we need to always try and do as much research as we can for ourselves and then make up your own mind. So I hope that answered your question, Russell. And with that, I think it's time for us to leave beautiful flamingo fingers and their feathers intact. And let's head on over to Jamala. Where the numbers of elephants have increased. Nice little breeding that's pulled in. Join the zebra and the odd bull. Lovely little sighting now. At the drinking spot where water comes out at this particular waterhole. And here's some guinea fowl are obviously around somewhere here. Okay. So Soul loves nature, commenting, making some great points, Ralph, a great discussion. I think that's important to remember that, it's great that people get emotional, but you need to sort of analyze the facts and know that we're all human and we're all in this together. So I don't think it all, the world is so polarized currently that that's not the idea, is to polarize people more. I think, that's one side of the story, and animals are going to be used by humans, I think, until the end of time. There's no getting around it. I think just trying to do it ethically, and where we can sort of produce things or biomimic things, such as down feathers, where we now have the likes of 3D printers, as you see one of the young males trying to mate with a female there in the background. The likes of 3D printers, could that be our way forward? We do have the technology and the intellect and the ability to source, grow, create alternatives to our past animal use that is more ethical and cruelty-free. I think we need to start, just going through the processes of getting a little bit away from cruelty of animals wherever possible. Of course, I'm sure you would all agree, being animal lovers watching this show, I don't think you'd be watching it if you weren't. But no need to polarize even more. I think we need to be excited in the stage of the evolution of humans and how we can now get past the period where, we just used and abused wildlife. I think we have the ability to change. And so that's what's exciting. So even though we're watching elephants now, Spaz Lankov was asking, have flamingos historically lived in Europe? So to explain the answer, Spaz, the distribution of all flamingos are found in tropical and subtropical areas. Now, the populations of Chilean flamingos are found in central Peru, both coasts of southern South America, mainly in the winter, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Peru, Bolivia, and southern Brazil. Stragglers have been reported on the Falkland Islands and in Ecuador. The lesser flamingo is primarily an African species, like we see there at Kamfersdam, and populations are found in eastern, southwestern, and western Africa. In addition, a sizable population nests in India, where stragglers can be found as far north as southern Spain. So, some stragglers you could find in Europe, and the James flamingo. Jeepers, that was a big trumpet. So the James flamingo has the most restricted range of all flamingo species. They're found in southern Peru, northeastern Chile, western Bolivia, and northwestern Argentina. The Andean flamingos are found in southern Peru, north central Chile, western Bolivia, and northwestern Argentina. The Caribbean flamingo is found throughout the Caribbean: Cuba, the Bahamas, the Yucatan, Turks and Caicos, the Galapagos Islands, and the northern part of South America. The greater flamingo is the most widespread distribution of all flamingo species. Populations are found in northwest India, the Middle East, the western Mediterranean, should also be a little bit into Europe, and Africa. Limited numbers of the species can be found over much of northern Europe and eastward to Siberia. So yes, indeed, you will have some flamingos in Europe, albeit I think in patches, and mainly the stragglers and so on. So not quite as prevalent as in the tropical and subtropical areas, but yes, indeed, you will get something going on here. Some kind of difference or dispute has been had, and everybody knows about it. You can see often when they stand still, there's a real discussion going on. Seems like they're having one now. There's all sorts going on. A bit of playtime off on the left. A little bit more serious stuff here with the breeding herd. It's just so interesting. There's just always so much happening within, the herds of elephants. So Molly R wants to know, with elephants, do the matriarchs walk in the front or back usually? So Molly R, the matriarch is usually the oldest, the most experienced, and the sort of mentally strongest of the group. So generally towards the front, she's normally leading the group. But if it's a well-walked trail that they do on a regular basis, maybe she not necessarily have to be in front. She is the one that gives the leading call, though. So very often decisions are made through voting within the sort of mature females within the group. So she doesn't rule with an iron fist. It depends on the dynamics of the herd. If she's a lot older than the rest of them, then maybe she sort of vetoes their decisions and she's the one that makes them ultimately. But within groups where there are similar aged, mature females, it's a consensus that they'll all come to, but she has the ultimate decision, and she's normally the one with the highest or the most vote within the decision making. So it's not necessarily always that she'll be in front. It's like a leadership group within humans as well. Not necessarily the one that walks in front that's making the decisions. It's maybe one that's further back that made the decisions, but still being led by mature adults in front as well as part of the leadership group. So it's not always as simple as the matriarch's always in front or always at the back. It depends on the situation. And Molly R again asking, thanks for all your questions. Is it great? Why do the elephants huddle in a group sometimes? Normally we see them spread out. So Molly R, it's normally these breeding herds, especially when they have little youngsters with them, that huddle together. It's mainly for protection of those youngsters, especially when there's bulls about and they're being boisterous. Oh, there's a little bit of angst going on here. Somebody's getting chased off. Normally around those bulls is when there's a bit more huddling, when maybe there's another breeding herd that arrives. But I would say the majority of the time is when there's either predators or when there's bulls in must or young, boisterous bulls around. That's when you see a lot of huddling. Protection, I would say, primarily of the youngsters. Those guinea fowl are really chirping away. So here comes a big bull, and as he comes into the area, you see how there's almost a real shift from the breeding herd to get out of his way. And that chin spot bat is really calling away. Other than the guinea fowl, that is the predominant bird call currently. So there's just so many vocals going on. I'm just allowing you to enjoy all of this without spoiling it with my voice. So enjoy. And such a lovely sound with the guinea fowl as well. And now that the Ellies are gone a little bit quiet, I've got a question from Sasha asking, because elephants are all big, is it a bit difficult to tell when they are pregnant? It's not super evident, Sasha, when they are pregnant, because also remember that they're hindgut fermenters, so they always do look a little bloated, much like zebra, who are also a little bit difficult to tell when they're pregnant, but they're just a little extra bloated than usual. And it normally just bulges almost in the middle of their, of their ribs or their bellies, out the sides. That for me is an indicator. Same with the zebra, and you can also see that they're just a lot heavier when they run in comparison to the others. So I say warthog's also difficult to tell. It's a difficult one with the hindgut fermenters. I've found in my own experience to tell when they're pregnant, because they don't, they're already bloated, as I've mentioned. So a little bit extra bloating, I would say, is all that there is. And then if you're used to looking at these, elephants a lot, then you can sort of pick out one that does seem to be a little bit more bloated than usual, and they're normally pregnant. You see, for instance, this one that's in the water, there's a female there in the water off on the right. So, second from the right. Looking at her, I would say that she is potentially pregnant. That one there with that youngster, but that youngster looks to be, it could be, 3 to 4 years of age. And that's generally when they would, um, in a natural cycle, could get pregnant again. She, for me, is a good candidate of one that's pregnant. When she turns to face us front on, you may see what I'm talking about. It just looks a little bit extra there in comparison to the rest. Really powerful trumpet. I don't know if you agree with me, but she looks extra bloated, and I would guess she's pregnant. See them all standing still again. They're having a chat, discussion. Sometimes highly excited, other times very relaxed. Seems like a decision has been made, though, now, and there seems to be some movement. Little youngster, trunk up, sniffing, smelling, tasting, working things out. So, Dark Mane Lover asking, Ralph, how do you feel about elephants being in captive management of all sorts? When is it okay for Ellies to be in sanctuaries? Dark Mane Lover, I don't think there's a one size fits all sort of approach to elephants, with them being such big animals and coming into conflict with humans whenever they are in the wild and we encroach onto natural areas that aren't fenced, for instance. I think it's important to have sanctuaries for elephants. We have Sri Lanka, India. They've proven that this does work. I think though South Africa, it's pretty populated now, hitting 65 million people, and so elephants are only contained within the national parks. When there are injuries and so on, and the elephants can't carry on in the wild, sanctuaries, yeah, it's a way of education, for people to be able to go and see them and learn about them. I think education is key for people. In the likes of Namibia as well, the desert elephants, they do come into conflict with humans there as well, once again. But, I think it's a toss-up. Do you move an elephant to a sanctuary, as we would call it, away from its natural environment, potentially away from the herds and its social life? Sometimes I think it's almost better to put the animal out. I'm just being dead honest, and that's always, as I say, not the opinion or reasoning of Wild Earth. This is me talking, in my opinion. I very much am of the opinion, if you find a bird that's fallen out of its nest, if you want to help it, put it in the fork of the tree and let its parents help it. I'm not a proponent of taking the bird and trying to rear it. I've seen so many people try to do this, and 99% of the time, the bird or the little animal actually dies. So I think the best chance the animal actually has is in its natural environment with, the help of its parents or not. And then at least it's out of its misery pretty quickly. So with elephants being iconic species, big animals, putting them in sanctuaries, if it's for education purposes, for people to understand, and it's for the better good of the elephants, sure. But otherwise, I think it's probably better to put them out of their misery. But once again, that's just me, huh? So don't take it for anything more than that. I'm just a real proponent of wild circumstances, staying with their natural environment. And if that's not possible, then put them out. So actually, to answer your question, Dark Mane Lover, I don't know when it's okay for Ellies to be in sanctuaries. If they're still within a sociable structure, within a relatively close natural environment to what they're used to, and they still have freedom of movement, then potentially. Otherwise, if those sort of parameters can't be met, then I think it's better for the animal, and that's who I'm thinking of, to not live a life of torture. And maybe just because it's got a nice, lovely green grass, and a nice area to go into out of the weather. Elephants don't care about the weather really. They stay out in the elements all the time. So I think to protect it in such ways is sometimes detracting from their real natural being. I don't know if they enjoy it that much. I think they'd rather be standing out in the rain than holed up in an enclosure. But how can I tell for sure? Because I'm not an elephant and I don't understand their subsonic communication. So, yeah, it's a tough one, but that's just my opinion and nothing more. So this big bull seems to have calmed down now, and there's not so much angst. You see, sometimes arguments are good, and even within elephants, they can have arguments, and they can come to an agreement and a settlement, and everything calms down after that. Sometimes the best friends are made through fights, and if you do have a good friend and you never fight, I find that they aren't such good friends. The best friends are made through lots of fights, and the best family as well. So you can see now they've all relaxed, even though they had plenty disagreement earlier, obviously, about something. Not to say that it won't happen again, as you see now the bull just pushing his way in there. And while he's doing that, we are slowly heading towards the end of the show. So I hope you've all enjoyed today's show and the topics discussed and the time spent with these animals at the different waterholes. It's been lovely here at Jamala. Also a nice time at Vic Falls and at Tau. Always different. No day is the same. That's what makes it special, I'd say. So thanks to you, the viewers, for joining us. And don't forget that I'll be back again tomorrow at the same time, same place, for another episode of Live at the Waterhole. So don't miss out. And also don't miss out later on. There will be the Sunset Safari. All the naturalists out and about in the Amakala Game Reserve as well as in the Sabi Sands. So don't miss out. You don't know which new leopard is going to be found today or whatever else might be on the cards. Yesterday was Laluka, but there might be another one today. So don't go anywhere. And thanks to the wildlife, of course, for being the stars of the show and the whole Wild Earth team. You guys rock. Seems like this bull's now finally got his spot in there for a drink. So that's it from me for now, folks. Give it horns, bush greetings. Until tomorrow, cheers.